The Highway of Ghosts, the 50-car pileup that changed everything. The sound of a massive car pileup isn't what you see in the movies. It isn't a single clean explosion. It's a rhythmic, sickening sequence of crushing metal crunch, smash, scream, crunch echoing through a fog so thick you can't see your own outstretched hand. That night on Interstate 80, the world didn't end with a bang. It ended with the sound of 100 tons of steel folding like origami in the freezing dark. I was the first officer on the scene, standing in a graveyard of twisted chrome, hearing voices calling out from inside a mountain of wreckage that reached 20 feet high. I had one flashlight, one radio, and a feeling in my gut that told me not everyone was going home. If you want to know what it's truly like to work a mass casualty incident, where the very air you breathe is a mixture of gasoline and ice, stay with me. This is the story of the Highway of Ghosts. Welcome back to Firefighter Rescue Stories. I'm Chief Mike, and I've spent 35 years pulling people out of the places they never thought they'd end up. Today's story is a heavy one. It's about the night nature and machine collided in the worst way possible. Before we go back to that frozen stretch of highway, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. We are building a community of people who respect the grit and the sacrifice of first responders, and your support is what keeps these stories alive. If you've ever survived a close call on the road, or if you have family in the service, drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. Now let's go back to February 2004. The shift started like any other. The coffee was strong, the air in the station was warm, and the guys were playing cards in the day room. But outside, the sky was a bruised purple color. A polar vortex, the meteorologist called it. In plain English, it meant a flash freeze was coming. Within an hour, the rain turned to sleet, and the sleet turned to a blinding, horizontal snow that erased the horizon. We calls it whiteout conditions. It's the kind of weather where you shouldn't even be walking your dog, let alone driving 60 miles per hour on a major interstate. At 7:42 p.m., the tones dropped. It was a reported multi-vehicle accident. Initially, we thought it was a standard two-car slide-off. We climbed into the rig, the heaters humming, and started the slow crawl toward the highway. But as we got closer to the on-ramp, the radio traffic started to change. It went from calm to frantic in a matter of seconds. Dispatch, state police are on scene. We have a massive pileup, multiple fires. We need every available ambulance in the county. Close the north and south lanes. Now, when we crested the hill and saw the scene, the air in the cab of the engine went silent. It looked like a giant had taken a handful of matchbox cars and slammed them into the pavement. There were semi-trucks jackknifed across all three lanes. There were sedans crushed beneath trailers. There were SUVs perched on top of Jersey barriers. And through the swirling snow, you could see the orange glow of three separate fires beginning to grow. The wind was howling at 40 miles per hour, fanning the flames and carrying the smell of burning rubber and antifreeze across the fields. I stepped out of the rig, and the wind nearly took my helmet off. The ground was a sheet of black ice. You couldn't walk, you had to shuffle. I grabbed my command vest and my heavy thermal imaging camera. "Sullivan!" I shouted over the wind. "Get the jaws of life and the heavy cribbing. We're going to be here all night. Start at the edge and work your way in." The first car I reached was a small silver coupe. It was wedged halfway under the rear of a tanker truck. The roof had been sheared off like a sardine can. I knelt down in the slush, my flashlight cutting a weak path through the snow. Inside was a young woman. She was conscious, but her eyes were glassy, the look of someone whose brain is trying to process a trauma it can't handle. "Hey there," I said, my voice low and steady. "My name is Mike. I'm with the fire department." "You're doing great. I need you to stay perfectly still for me." She looked at me, her teeth chattering. I was going to my mom's," she whispered. The lights just disappeared. Then the world started spinning. I did a quick assessment. Her legs were pinned by the dashboard. In the fire service, we call this entrapment by dashboard intrusion. It's a delicate dance. If you pull too hard, you cause a hemorrhage. If you don't move fast enough, the car behind you, which is already leaking fuel, might catch fire. I could see smoke beginning to waft from the engine bay of the car directly behind her. "Sullivan, I need the hydraulic spreaders over here, now." While we wait for the team to set up the heavy equipment, I want to take a moment to talk to you guys. This is the part of the job people don't see, the waiting. The 5 minutes that feel like 5 hours when you're re-holding someone's hand while they re-trapped in a cage of steel. If you're finding this story intense, please give this video a like. It helps us reach more people and share the reality of what happens on our highways every day. And tell me, have you ever been stuck in a storm like this? What was going through your head? Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Now, back to that silver coupe. The jaws of life is a terrifying looking tool, but to a trapped victim, it's the most beautiful piece of machinery on earth. It weighs about 50 pounds and can exert tons of pressure. Sullivan and I worked in tandem. He positioned the tips of the spreaders into the door seam. Work-lack. The metal screamed as it was forced apart. The door popped off its hinges with a sound like a gunshot. But we weren't done. The dashboard was still crushing her lower body. We had to do what's called a dash roll. We positioned a heavy ram against the base of the B-pillar and the dashboard. "Watch her legs," I told Sullivan. I kept my hand on the woman's shoulder, feeling the vibrations of the metal moving. Slowly, inch by inch, the dashboard lifted. "I can feel my feet," she sobbed. "Good, that's good," I said. We slid a backboard behind her and carefully, gingerly, extracted her from the wreck, just as the car behind us erupted in a ball of flame. The heat was so intense it melted the reflectors on my turnouts. We handed her off to the paramedics and turned back to the pileup. That was just one person. There were 49 cars to go. The smoke from the burning car was being blown sideways by the blizzard, creating a blackout inside the whiteout. I started moving deeper into the pileup, climbing over the hoods of cars that were nothing more than scrap metal. I heard a muffled crying coming from a minivan that was turned on its side. It was wedged between two semi-trailers, forming a small, dark tunnel. I crawled into the space. It was tight, so tight I had to take off my air tank and push it ahead of me. The smell of leaking diesel was everywhere. If a spark hit this area, I'd be in a pressurized bomb. I reached the minivan and shone my light through the shattered side window. Inside were 3 children and an elderly man. The man was slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious. The kids were in the back, huddled together, their faces streaked with tears and soot. "Is he dead?" the oldest boy asked. He couldn't have been more than 10. "I'm checking, buddy, I'm checking," I said. I reached for the man's carotid artery. It was weak, thready, but it was there. He had a massive laceration on his forehead, but he was alive. The problem was the minivan was being crushed. The 2 semi-trailers were slowly shifting on the ice, narrowing the gap. I could hear the metal of the van's roof groaning as it was compressed. I had maybe 10 minutes before this van became a pancake. I looked at the boy. "I need you to be the brave one for your siblings. I'm going to pass you out through this window first, okay? My friends are outside. They're going to take you to a warm truck. I'm not leaving my grandpa," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "In 35 years, you see a lot of things. You see cowardice, and you see bravery that defies logic." This kid was a hero. I reached in and squeezed his hand. "I promise you, I am coming back for your grandpa. But I need you to go first so I have room to work. Can you do that for me?" He looked at his little sister, then back at me. He nodded. I pulled the children out one by one, dragging them through the narrow tunnel of debris. Each time I emerged into the freezing wind, I felt the temperature dropping. The thermometer on the engine was reading 10 below zero now. The water from our hoses was freezing as soon as it hit the ground, turning the entire scene into a skating rink of death. Once the kids were safe, I went back in for the grandfather. This was the dangerous part. I was alone in a tunnel of shifting steel, under a leaking fuel tank, with a victim who couldn't move. I used a small reciprocating saw to cut the seatbelt. The sparks were flying dangerously close to the diesel. My heart was thumping against my ribs. Just one more minute, I thought. Just give me one more minute. I grabbed the man under his arms and started to back out. That's when I heard it, a deep, low rumble. One of the semi-trucks was sliding. The ice couldn't hold the weight anymore. "Mike, get out of there. The rig is moving." Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio. I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I let go, this man was dead. I dug my boots into the ice and pulled. The metal above me shrieked as the gap closed. I felt the sleeve of my jacket snag on a piece of jagged steel. I ripped it free, ignoring the pain in my shoulder, and gave one final desperate heave. We cleared the gap just as the two trailers slammed together with the sound of a falling mountain. The minivan disappeared, crushed into a ball of silver metal no bigger than a suitcase. I lay there in the snow, gasping for air, the grandfather on top of my chest. We were alive by less than 2 seconds. I sat there for a moment, the snow piling up on my visor. I looked around at the chaos, the flashing lights, the black smoke, the screaming wind. It felt like the end of the world. But then I saw the 3 kids being wrapped in blankets by the medics. I saw the oldest boy looking at me. He gave me a tiny, shivering thumbs up. That's when you realize why you're there. You don't do it for the adrenaline. You don't do it because you're a tough guy. You do it because that boy needs his grandfather. You do it because you're the only thing standing between a family and a tragedy. But the night was far from over. We had only cleared 5 cars. There were still 45 to go, and the fire in the center of the pileup was starting to reach a hazardous materials tanker. The roar of the wind was nothing compared to the sound that came next. A deep, metallic thud that vibrated through the soles of my boots. I looked up and saw it. About 50 yards into the wreckage, a tanker truck marked with a bright red flammable placard was being licked by the flames of a nearby sedan. The fire was dancing right around the pressure relief valve. In the fire service, we call that a ticking time bomb. If that tank got too hot, it wouldn't just explode. It would create, believe, a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. It would turn this entire highway into a crater, and everyone still trapped in their cars wouldn't stand a chance. "Sullivan, get the master stream on that tanker. We need to cool the shell." I screamed into my radio. I watched my team scramble, dragging heavy lines across the treacherous ice, their movements slowed by the sheer weight of their gear and the freezing mud. The water hit the hot metal and turned into a massive wall of steam, making the visibility go from bad to non-existent. We were working in a gray void, lit only by the rhythmic strobe of red and blue emergency lights. I started moving toward the center of the pileup, my eyes scanning every window, every gap in the steel. That's when I heard a horn. Not a short honk, but a continuous, mournful wail. It was coming from a semi-truck that had been hit so hard the cab was twisted 180 degrees from the trailer. I climbed over a pile of shattered glass and reached the driver's side. The door was gone. The driver, a man who looked like he'd been driving since before I was born, was pinned by the steering column. His face was gray, his breathing shallow. "Hang on, brother," I said, reaching in to check his pulse. "We're here. The legs," he wheezed. "I can't feel my legs, Chief." I looked down and my stomach turned. The engine block had been pushed into the cab. He was pinned from the waist down by 1,000 pounds of hot iron. This wasn't going to be a simple pop the door rescue. We were going to need the heavy-duty wreckers just to move the debris off of him. But the wreckers were miles away, stuck in the same traffic jam we were trying to clear. Before I tell you how we managed to get that man out of that steel trap, I need to check in with you. If you're still with me, it's because you know that in these moments, every second is a lifetime. This is the reality of being a first responder making choices when there are no good options. If you appreciate this raw look into the job, hit that like button right now. It helps us reach the people who need to hear these stories of resilience. And I want to know, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to face? How did you keep going? Tell me in the comments. Now back to the cab of that semi. The fire near the hazmat tanker was growing. The water we were pouring on it was freezing on the ground, creating a literal lake of ice around us. I looked at Sullivan. We have to use the hydraulic rams to push the dash, but the floor pan is too weak. It'll just punch a hole through the metal. Then we go through the floor, Sullivan said, his face set in a grim mask of determination. We crawled under the twisted chassis of the truck. The smell of leaking oil and coolant was overwhelming. We were lying in freezing slush, working with heavy tools above our heads. It was exhausting, back-breaking work. We had to cut through the heavy-gauge steel of the floorboards just to find a solid anchor point for our rescue tools. Every time the wind gusted, the entire wreckage shifted, creak, moan. It sounded like the highway was alive and it wanted to swallow us whole. I was positioned near the driver's head, talking to him, keeping him awake. "Tell me about your truck," I said, trying to distract him from the sound of the saw cutting through metal inches from his feet. She's a 94 Peterbilt, he whispered, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Best damn rig on the road. Was supposed to be my last trip, retirement ... Next week. My heart squeezed. That's the story of this job. It's always the last trip. It's always the day before the vacation. I gripped his hand tighter. You're going to make it to that retirement, you hear me? You're going to be sitting on a porch somewhere laughing about this night. We finally got the ram into position. Push it, I yelled. The hydraulics hissed. The metal of the steering column began to groan as it was forced upward. I watched the driver's face. He let out a scream of agony as the blood rushed back into his crushed limbs. It's a terrible sound, but in our world, a scream is a sign of life. We pulled him free just as the hazmat team gave the evacuate signal. The tanker was venting. A high-pitched whistle, like a tea kettle from hell, started screaming through the night. Everyone back now, Sullivan roared. We hauled the driver onto a sled and sprinted, or as close to a sprint as you can get on ice away from the center of the pileup. We got behind a concrete bridge abutment just as the pressure relief valve on the tanker fully opened. A pillar of flame shot 50 feet into the air, lighting up the blizzard like a second sun. It didn't explode, but the heat was so intense it began to melt the asphalt. We spent the next 6 hours moving from car to car. We found a family of 4 in an SUV that had been flipped like a coin. They were shaken, but miraculously unhurt. We found a dog, a golden retriever, trapped in the trunk of a car that had been rear-ended. He licked my face as I pulled him out. But we also found the ones we couldn't save. The ones who were gone before the first siren even echoed in the distance. By 4 a.m., the blizzard began to die down. The whiteout turned into a soft, mocking dusting of snow. The highway was a graveyard of silent machines. I stood there, my turnouts frozen stiff, looking at the dozens of ambulances lined up. The scale of the disaster was finally visible. It wasn't just a pileup. It was a scar on the landscape. I walked over to the command post. My boots felt like lead. I saw the young boy from the minivan, the one who wouldn't leave his grandfather. He was sitting in the back of a police car, wrapped in a bright yellow blanket. He saw me and stood up. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and wrapped his arms around my legs. I'm a big man. I've seen things that would make a statue cry. But in that moment, in the middle of a frozen highway surrounded by fire and death, I felt a tear roll down my soot-stained cheek. I put my hand on his head and whispered, "We got him, kid. He's okay." As we prepared for the final phase of the cleanup and the long reflections on what this night meant for all of us, I want to thank you for staying. We're about to go into the aftermath, the part where the adrenaline fades and the weight of the night truly settles in. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time. Join us as we honor the survivors and the fallen. And remember, every time you get behind the wheel in a storm, think of the highway of ghosts. I'll never forget the way the sun looked when it finally rose that morning. It wasn't a bright, happy sun. It was a cold, pale disk that revealed the true cost of the night. But in that light, I saw my brothers. I saw Sullivan, his face covered in ice, helping a medic pack up gear. I saw the rookie, who had grown up 5 years and 5 hours, leaning against the engine. We were exhausted, we were broken, but we were still standing. The driver of the Peterbilt? He did make it to retirement. He sent a photo to the station 6 months later. He was sitting on a porch, just like I said, holding a glass of iced tea. His legs were in braces, but he was smiling. That photo is still pinned to the board in the day room. It's a reminder that even when the world is crashing down around you, there's always a reason to keep pushing. Thank you for listening to this account. It's not an easy one, but it's a true one. Stay safe out there. Watch the roads, watch out for each other, and never take a single mile for granted. I'm Chief Mike, and this has been Firefighter Rescue Stories. The sun didn't bring warmth that morning. It only brought clarity. As the pale light filtered through the thinning clouds, it revealed the true anatomy of the disaster. The steam rising from the cooling hazmat tanker looked like white ghosts dancing over the blackened husks of cars. We had been working for nearly 10 hours straight. My body had moved past the point of exhaustion and into a strange, rhythmic numbness where my limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. I looked down at my hands. My gloves were shredded, the leather worn thin from gripping frozen steel and hydraulic levers. I walked back toward the engine to swap out my air bottle one last time. The scene was quieter now. The screaming had stopped. The sirens were mostly silenced. All that remained was the low thud of heavy tow trucks arriving to begin the monumental task of deconstructing the mountain of metal. But as I passed a jackknife refrigerated trailer, I saw something that made my heart stop. A small red mitten was sticking out from under a slab of ice near the median. In this job, your mind automatically goes to the worst-case scenario. I dropped to my knees, frantically brushing away the snow and slush, praying that it was just a lost piece of clothing. But then I saw the outline of a car, or what used to be a car. It had been pushed completely under the snowbank by a snowplow that had been caught in the initial chain reaction. The vehicle was entirely buried, invisible to the thermal cameras we had used earlier, because the snow had acted as an insulator, masking the heat signature of anyone inside. "Sullivan, over here, I need shovels." I roared. My voice was a shredded whisper, but the urgency carried. We started digging with a desperation that only comes when you realize you might have missed someone. The snow was packed hard, like concrete. We dug for 5 minutes that felt like 5 centuries. Finally, our shovels hit glass. I cleared a small patch of the rear window and shone my light inside. My breath caught in my throat. There, in the back seat, was a woman huddled over a small child. They were perfectly still. They looked like they were sleeping in a crystal tomb. I smashed the window with my Halligan tool. The sound of the glass breaking was like a gunshot in the morning air. I reached in, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt for a pulse on the mother's neck. Nothing. She was cold, too cold. But then, I moved my hand to the child. A tiny, faint warmth radiated from the bundle. A flicker of a heartbeat. "She's alive, the kid is alive." I yelled. Before I tell you about the miracle that happened in that frozen car, I need to remind you why we share these moments. This isn't just about the tragedy. It's about the thin thread of hope that we refuse to let go of. If you've stayed with me through this entire night on the highway, you're part of this story now. Please take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your engagement helps us honor the survivors and the heroes who don't always get a parade. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you were at your absolute limit, only to find one last burst of strength? Let me know in the comments. We read them all. Now let's get that child out of the ice. We worked with a surgical precision I didn't know we still had in us. We peeled back the roof of the car as if we were opening an envelope. The mother had used her own body as a shield, wrapping herself around her daughter to trap every bit of her body heat. She had made the ultimate sacrifice in those final freezing hours. When we lifted the little girl out, she let out a tiny, shivering whimper. She was severely hypothermic, but she was breathing. We rushed her to the nearest warm ambulance. I stood there for a long time, watching the medics work on her, my hands resting on the side of the truck. I looked back at the buried car. In 35 years, you learn that you can't save everyone. You learn that sometimes the win is just saving one person out of 100. It doesn't make the loss of the others any easier, but it gives you the strength to put your boots back on the next shift. As the last of the victims were transported, the highway began to look less like a battlefield and more like a construction site. The state police were starting their investigation, measuring skid marks that stretched for hundreds of feet. I sat down on the step of Engine 7, staring at a discarded coffee cup tumbling across the ice. My adrenaline was completely gone, replaced by a heavy, hollow ache in my chest. Sullivan sat down next to me. He didn't say anything at first. He just handed me a sandwich that was half frozen and a thermos of coffee that was more mud than liquid. We sat there in silence, two old warhorses watching the sun climb higher into the sky. "We did good work tonight, Mike," he finally said. "We did what we could," I replied. "But the cost? The cost was too high." "It always is," Sullivan whispered. "That's why we're the ones who show up. Because someone has to be there to pay it." That night taught me something about the ghost in the fog. It's not just the people we lose. It's the versions of ourselves that stay behind on those highways. Every major rescue takes a little piece of you. It carves out a bit of your soul and replaces it with a memory you can never quite shake. But it also gives you a perspective on life that most people never get to see. You realize that the arguments you had with your spouse, the bills you're worried about, the petty stresses of daily life, none of it matters. What matters is the warmth of a hand in yours and the breath in your lungs. I remember driving back to the station as the city was waking up. People were heading to work, clearing snow off their windshields, complaining about the commute. They had no idea that just 5 miles away, 100 people had lived through the worst night of their lives. They didn't see the melted asphalt or the red mitten in the snow. And in a way, I was glad they didn't. Our job is to carry that weight so they don't have to. I went home that morning, walked into my house, and hugged my wife so hard she asked if I was okay. I didn't tell her about the semi-truck driver or the little girl in the ice. Not then. I just sat at the kitchen table and watched the birds at the feeder, grateful for the silence. If you've made it to the end of this journey with me, I want to thank you. These stories are my legacy, and by listening to them, you're helping me keep the memory of my brothers and sisters alive. This was the highway of ghosts, but it was also a testament to the fact that even in the deepest whiteout, there is a light that never goes out. Make sure you've liked this video and shared it with someone who needs a reminder of what true courage looks like. I have many more stories to tell, from the roar of a backdraft to the quiet rescue of a fallen hiker in the deep woods. Join us for the next one. Stay safe, watch the weather, and always keep an eye out for those who might be buried under the snow. This is Chief Mike, Firefighter Rescue Stories. Dispatch, Engine 7 is in quarters. End of watch.